Hello, everyone, and welcome to another year of Picture This. I forgot to put up this graphic, so I'm going to do it right now. The year of classics. And we are back with another classic year of 1966. Chad, welcome to Picture This. How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Sorry, you were mid-chew. I wasn't sure if this was like a bit, like it was like kind of like a Dracula thing, or if you were like mid-chewing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to catch you off guard, but thumbs up. You doing good?
Doing great. I am wearing, speaking of horror, I am wearing my Night of the Living Dead shirt because we are in the 60s.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, this was definitely an interesting slate. I'm not sure how good it is, and I'm very interested to see if you guys think this was a good slate or not, because there's at least one that I kind of love.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you say you guys as if you're talking to like a multiple amount of people. I mean, you might be talking to the audience out there, but you might also be talking about our guest. He's a man for my season, your season, and all seasons. It is Mr. William Roper, aka Malcolm Lay. I'll put you on the top there. How you doing, Malcolm? Welcome back to Picture This. It's been quite a while, 2 years since you've been on this show. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. This is one of those years that I think I was annoying Dylan a lot by saying like, you make sure you get me down for this year, but because like we'll get to it, but one of these movies is one of my favorite of all time. So.
Yeah, I remember, way back when just we had you on and we were like, we'd love to have you back. You were like, well, 1966. And I was like, all right, okay, well, we'll get there. And then like time went on and then we thought about the year of classics and we're like, hey, we're going to bring on a different guest for each year of classics. And hey, I think it's great too, because like for a slate that doesn't necessarily have as many like popular films, like it's not as popular as a slate. Like a few months ago, like Chad and I did with Matt, like 1957, which had like Bridge on the River Kwai, 12 Angry Men, and Witness for the Prosecution, three of the most famous, most popular films of all time. And then two others, obviously, but and Peyton Place obviously had its own popularity and stuff, but a really heavy hitting slate of like very big notable titles. Here, it's like a little more under the radar, I feel like, as time has gone on. So, bless you, Chad. I think it'll be really fun to talk about this slate in particular. I'm just going to say the slate right now because I always forget to do it early in the episode, but we are talking about 1966 for the 1967 Oscars, and that slate is Alfie, A Man for All Seasons, The Russians Are Coming, The Sand Pebbles, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So those are the 5 films. Some of those probably more notable than others in the grand lexicon of film, but I was really excited when Malcolm was like, this is the year I want to do, because I know which film you're talking about. We won't say it yet, but it's one of Malcolm's favorite films, and I'm glad he's on this one because for a film slate that might not get as much attention because of the names of the slate, we will get a lot of attention because of our amazing guest, Malcolm. So we're happy to have you back. Our last guest appearance with Malcolm was our highest viewed video ever for Picture This. So Malcolm's bringing on the views. He's got all those overseas watching. But of course, we are back in the 60s, as Chad said. So Chad, really quickly, tell us, what is going on in the world in 1966? What's happening out there?
Well, first, I did want to say I was kind of shocked when I found out. I was like, Malcolm was on here 2 years ago. Oh, wow, we've been doing this for quite a while. But
right?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get into the history. 1966, a lot of things happened, apparently. I was scrambling to get a lot of things jotted down here. The House of Representatives for the United States state Georgia refuses to allow African-American Representative Julian Bond to take a seat for being anti-war. I believe he is able to sit down at some point later in the year. Lyndon Johnson refuses to withdraw from South Vietnam until communist aggression has ended. The Beaumont children disappear on their way to Glenelg, South Australia, never to be seen again. Very sad story there. The Australian dollar is introduced. Lyndon Johnson discusses the course of the Vietnam War in Hawaii with Nugent Cao Kai of South Vietnam. This one's popular. John Lennon states, "We're more popular than Jesus now," speaking of the Beatles, pissing a lot of people off. The United States increases the number of troops in Vietnam. The FIFA World Cup trophy was stolen in London, but was found by a puppy named Pickles. What? American protests the Vietnam War. Hold on. Luna 10 is the first man-made object to enter lunar orbit. The opening of the Parliament of the United Kingdom is televised for the first time. Uniform daylight savings time is first observed in most parts of North America. Irish bank workers go on strike. A lunar eclipse takes place. Tens of thousands of anti-war demonstrators picket the White House, then rally at the Washington Monument. You know, how you're supposed to protest. Martin Luther King Jr. speaks about the Vietnam War. Fidel Castro declares martial law in Cuba. Oh, and Dylan would love this. It's a Small World opens in Disneyland. Miranda versus Arizona. The Supreme Court decides that police must inform suspects of their rights before questioning them, also known as the Miranda rights. The National Organization for Women is founded, acronym NOW. Bob Dylan is injured in a motorcycle accident. I think he recovered. The Caesars Palace Casino and Hotel opens in Las Vegas. Oh, and then John Lennon apologizes for his earlier statement. The Beatles performed their last live concert ever at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. The United States bans LSD, so the party's over, I guess. The Black Panther Party, speaking of party, is founded. And then this might be a little bit of a quiz here. Walt Disney records his final filmed appearance before his death, where he lays out his plans for, Dylan, do you know?
The Jungle Book, I believe, right? That's his last film? What are you asking?
His last filmed appearance, where he lays out a specific plan for something.
For Disney World, maybe?
For Epcot specifically.
Epcot, okay. Epcot specifically. Okay, yeah, because I knew like around this time is where Disneyland was open and World was just about to open. So yeah, that makes sense, or it had just opened, but very cool. Cool, quit. I like that. You're bringing like trivia into the history of it. I love that.
Right.
Chad, any albums, any births, any deaths?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and start with the births.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Birth.
Yep, a lot of people here. One of my favorites, Adam Sandler, Shabadoo. Mike Tyson, Gordon Ramsay. Oh, not a great name. Dan Schneider, Janet Jackson, Patrick Dempsey, Rick Astley. You got Rickrolled. Helena Bonham Carter, Halle Berry, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Luke Perry, Salma Hayek, David Schwimmer, Jeff Buckley, Cindy Crawford, Neil McDonough, J.J. Abrams, Kiefer Sutherland, Rainn Wilson, Bill Goldberg, Darius Rucker, Sinead O'Connor, Stephen Baldwin, John Cusack, Toby Jones, Robin Wright, Martina McBride, and Billy Zane.
Wow. Great.
Yeah. For deaths, we already talked about him, Mr. Walt Disney, Buster Keaton, Montgomery Clift, Lenny Bruce, and Ken Miles.
Jeez.
Right.
Yeah. What a heavy hitting lineup. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Any albums, Chad? Do you have any on hand?
I have some right here. A very old copy of Revolver by the Beatles, speaking of Beatles. And then we also have Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. We talked about him earlier, too. And Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, one of the greatest albums ever made. Check out Love and Mercy if you haven't. One of the great biopic music movies. And then also we have Sounds of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, Aftermath by the Rolling Stones, Freak Out by the Mothers of Invention, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme, also by Simon and Garfunkel. Wild as the Wind by Nina Simone. The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor by the 13th Floor Elevators. And Face to Face by the Kinks.
Nice. There you go. Good music, good people, and always some good films. We always talk about some of the films that didn't make the cut, perhaps. Malcolm, you are our guest. Do you have any notable films of 66 that you'd like to highlight that didn't get nominated? Or
I looked this up earlier. There really wasn't a lot that I recognized my name, but I think the biggest one is probably The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was surprised that didn't get any love, but other than that, there wasn't really a lot of movies that kind of spoke out to me as like being big, noticeable ones to me.
Yeah. No, that's a big one. I mean, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, often considered the greatest Western, if not like one of them, and one of the great trilogies. So, not that film itself is a trilogy, even though it has 3 parts, but part of a bigger Fistful of Dollars trilogy. But yeah, a few other ones I had. A Fantastic Voyage, one of the most notable like sci-fi films ever made. A Funny Thing That Happened on the Way to the Form. Shout out Stephen Sondheim. Batman '66 is that year, and Alhazard Baltazar, which is just one of the most heartbreaking but amazingly beautiful beautiful films of all time. Those are the only ones I had. Chad, did you have any more to add for 1966?
Yeah, just a few. I had Dracula, Prince of Darkness, the original Django, Gamera versus Barugan. I think that's a Godzilla thing. How to Steal a Million, Torn Curtain, and then you mentioned Batman, which I think is a very fun movie. Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, and then for Best Picture worthy, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Sure.
There you go. So a little bit of a smaller year in general, and I think these films will also reflect that. Looking at just what was on the cusp on Oscar morning, what was a surprise? Alfie definitely surprised, not really nominated for anything before the Oscars. It kind of just got in based on popularity, it seems. It was one of the biggest films of that year. Sand Pebbles only nominated at Golden Globes, same as, Russians Are Coming, but that won Golden Globes, so that gave it an edge. And then, of course, the two big ones, Men Are For All Seasons and Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf wins in 1966 for the BAFTA, but it's Men For All Seasons that wins the 67 BAFTA because it was released later in Britain. So both of those films, safe to say, were probably the two heavy hitters going in. Probably I would have said at the time, because of the BAFTA win, that Virginia Woolf was maybe the favorite to win, only because the BAFTAs hadn't happened yet for Man For All Seasons. I'm going to mess that up a lot in this episode, but a Golden Globes also had the edge for a Man For All Seasons. So I'd say between those two, it was a pretty even neck and neck race going in. Just some Oscars facts for this ceremony. This is actually the first rare occurrence where in a period of 5 Best Picture films, only 2 had their directors nominated. So there's 3 directors from other films that get nominated. Only 2 get nominated. It's Fred Zinnemann for Man For All Seasons and Mike Nichols for Virginia Woolf, which is, I guess, also why they were probably the 2 frontrunners. The other 3 films didn't even have their directors nominated, which is a rarity. Sometimes you'll see one big snub, but for 3 of them to not get it, it really shows that they like the film more than they liked the art of the film, it seems. But the latter film, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, actually has a very interesting distinction. It is one of only 2 films in the history of cinema to be nominated for every eligible category it can, meaning every single one of its actors gets nominated, every single tech it's nominated for, and it gets nominated for writing, directing, and picture. It's one of those rare occurrences. So you see a nomination in actor, actress, supporting actress, because there are only 4 billed actors. There are extras, there's the waitress in the bar, but for a cast so small, you really only see this with casts that are very small, because like for Oppenheimer, for example, you can't nominate 70 people. So this is one of the only films where every single nomination it could get, it got, which is really, really cool. Just a really cool piece of history. And I think it's for a very deserving film. We'll talk about it later. Also second time in Oscars history that 2 siblings are nominated in the same category. Vanessa and Lynn Redgrave, both nominated for Best Actress that year, which is pretty cool. And famously, another thing we'll probably talk about when we talk about the meta narrative of one of these films, Elizabeth Taylor was informed of her having won the Best Actress award in London. So she wasn't at the ceremony, but she was acknowledged the win in London, but she was so frustrated that her husband, Richard Burton, lost the Best Actor award that she refused to hold a press conference for 2 weeks to address her own win. So a little bit of a FU to the Oscars for not awarding her and her husband. She felt like it was a very collaborative effort. It wasn't about her. It was about them. But a very interesting film to talk about when we get there, about just their relationship, but we will talk about it when we get there. But that's it for the Oscars. Does anyone have anything else about just the Oscars themselves that they want to comment on, or should we get right into it? Cool. All right. So let's get right into it. I mean, I have to ask, what's it all about? What's it all about, Malcolm? What's it all about, Chad? Let's talk about Alfie, the real person we're asking what it's all about for. Not the song. Y'all know the song. We're talking about the film. Alfie. Chad, tell us about Alfie.
Totally. Alfie, directed by Lewis Gilbert, written by Bill Naughton. Cinematography by Otto Heller. Music by Sonny Rollins. Starring Michael Caine, Shelley Winters, Millicent Martin, Vivian Merchant, Jane Asher, Julia Foster, Shirley Ann Field, Eleanor Braun, Denholm Elliott, Alfie Bass. He doesn't play Alfie, but he is Alfie Bass. And Graham Stark. Synopsis. A womanizer who leads a self-centered life is faced with events that lead him to question his uncaring ways. Based on Alfie by Bill Naughton.
Yeah. I was gonna make that joke too. I was like, of course, you cast someone in Alfie. Imagine that guy getting the casting call. Like you're auditioning for a role for a film named Alfie, and this guy's like, "Oh yeah, here we go," and you're playing the role of Harry, and he's probably like, "What?" You know. I just think that's really funny. But obviously, Michael Caine is Alfie, one of his more notable like early roles. This kind of like put him on the map alongside a few other films, but like this was like the big Michael Caine introduction to the world. It kind of made him famous in a way. Yeah, like where do we start? I mean, Malcolm, you're our guest. I guess we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Alfie, the film, the person, the song, whatever you want?
Yeah, this is one that I didn't know what to think going in. Like, it's just one of those ones that I've heard a lot about, just from the remake Jude Law and all that. But for whatever reason, it's one I haven't seen. But it I really enjoyed this movie though, because I think it's a lot of fun. Like, and Michael Caine, like, well, he's probably more known now, probably for doing his more serious stuff. But like he showed that like he is really good at comedy as well in this. Like, well, yeah, like you probably would have known that from Goldman anyway that he's good at comedy, but I think this might have been his first sort of big kind of comedic kind of thing. And
Yeah,
it was just but Shelley Winters I think was good, and I even did enjoy the music in this, and even the song, which I think it was Cher that did the song for Alfie. It was either Cher or someone else.
She might have covered it later, I think, but I think it was Oliver Nelson conducted it. I gotta find the actual written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, but was sung by Cher. Yep, so Cher sung it in the closing credits. Yeah, because I knew she had covered, like, her version is the most popular one out there. I mean, the song was the song is the thing most people know from the movie now. It's like people don't even know the film. It's like, you know, you sing "What's It All About?" They respond Alfie, like everyone knows that, but it's like no one really realizes it's from a movie, let alone like a pretty popular one at the time. This is like a really big hit.
That is kind of the thing that made me think that this was gonna be more of a comedy. Because like going into it, I was like, "Hey, Carrie, let's watch something light and fun like Alfie." And then we ended up being very depressed because of Alfie.
Wow.
So I mean, I get it. It's like one of those things with oh, by the way, this was my first young Michael Caine movie. And so I was like really excited because of that. I was like, here's how we start. Our good friend of the panel, Alan, has been trying to get me to watch young Michael Caine movies, and I finally got to one. And I'm not sure if I like this one all that much, to be honest, personally. And I think the reason why is because I was expecting a little bit something different. I was seeing Michael Caine playing this character who is kind of a piece of shit. Like, he's an asshole, and he just, like, you know, takes advantage of women, doesn't care about anyone. And I was just like waiting for him to have like this big change. And I think they tried to do it like towards the end, but then I was like, it's kind of too late. And I don't really feel like it like did the work to actually like have him, you know. And then the change that they were making was like this like really like hardcore like late term abortion that he has with one of his girlfriends, or trysts, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And he gets her pregnant and then kind of forces her to have the abortion, and then like sees like a you don't see it, but he sees like a very realistic fetus in it. And then we're just like torn to pieces, just like, what is this movie? This was a comedy. So just like, you know, maybe my expectations just kind of like turned it down a little bit. But then I was just kind of waiting for some sort of like change, and I just didn't really feel like I got it in this one. So I don't know, maybe on a rewatch it could get a little bit better for me, but you know, for now I was just like, this one might not rank very highly for me. Although I did really enjoy the Michael Caine talking to the camera thing, because
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's, and I'll let you go. That's a bit in one of my favorite shows, Malcolm in the Middle. Speaking of Malcolm, and that I was like, you know what? This is probably where Malcolm in the Middle got this, where Malcolm is in the world with people, and then he'll just start talking to the audience, and no one else knows he's talking to the audience. Yeah. So everything he can say, whatever he wants to the camera, and then go back to talking to whoever. I like that device. I think it's really kind of fun. So.
Yeah, it's a very Woody Allen like kind of trope, you know, and I think a lot of people would say like Annie Hall was like the first big one to do that, but really no, it's this. Like this is, I think, why a lot of people do hold it in high regards, because it does kind of invent this whole unreliable narrator. Not just the fact that he's addressing the audience, but he's spewing bullshit to us, and I think that's kind of one of the more interesting things about the film is that like he's telling us something, and we are very clearly seeing the opposite. And I think there's something to be said about that. The idea of like, you know, how you present yourself to others versus how you kind of convince yourself of who you are in a way. You almost kind of, it's almost like the sociopathic thing of like telling yourself, or more like not sociopathic, but what's the name for a pathological? It's like a pathological thing where you almost convince yourself you're a good person by convincing yourself in your own kind of head conversation. I kind of like how the audience is his way of kind of justifying his actions, or at least kind of brushing it off. It's almost as if he is kind of seducing us in a way, not like in a sexy way, but more of like a, I'm going to try to convince you that like I'm bullshitting you, the audience. But the thing is, the audience, we are smart enough to know that that's false. And I think it's a cool device, but I agree with you, Chad. I think it does have its lulls. I think the thing with is it's like, how much are you willing to say, oh, he's purposely, intentionally an asshole, so we can see the device in the film, rather than do we actually like it? Because there's something to be said about like, every film has unlikable characters in it, but there's also, it sometimes crosses over into just like not entertaining unlikable characters. And I think that's the interesting teeter here, where it's like a lot of the best villains, like obviously you're not rooting for them, but you love watching them. Whereas here it's like, do you actually like watching him, or are you just getting frustrated with him? And I think that kind of varies person to person. I'm kind of with you in the fact that like, I was struggling with him. I just wanted to keep being like, dude, like, what are you doing? You're fucking up left and right. But I know that's also the intention. But at the same time, it's like, while like it's the intention, it's still my own personal way and how I view things and people that makes me judge him a certain way. So I think it's a very interesting thing. And I think that's why the song is so influential, because like it literally asks the question. It's like, what's it all about? Is it just for the moment we live? What's it all about when you sort it out? Are we meant to take more than we give, or are we meant to be kind? Like, what is it about? Like, what is your kind of coming of age when you've already come of age? You know, what is this next step? It's kind of that middle age thing that like now we see explored in cinema a lot, like Tick Tick Boom, you know, I'm turning 30. Or even like Cha Cha Real Smooth that just came out, where it's like, I just got out of college, I'm living at my parents' house. Here it's kind of one step above that, where it's like he thinks he has his life together, but he doesn't, and he doesn't know that yet. And we, the audience, are able to see it kind of mold. But I do agree, I don't think he fully earns it by the end yet, but I do think there's at least enough there that I'm at least perplexed by it, even if though I'm not enjoying him throughout it. But yeah, I think there's a way to make this a little bit better. But I'm not sure. I really don't know what to fix necessarily. But I'm kind of with both of you. Like I liked it more than you did, Chad, but I don't think I liked it as much as Malcolm, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I will say, like, it's not so like I led with the negatives. Like, it's not that I wholly like did not enjoy this movie. Like, I enjoyed seeing Michael Caine like being Alfie, but then like we were talking about, like just seeing this person, like it's like, I guess it's kind of like if you're watching The Social Network and you're seeing like the main character being a piece of shit, but it's fascinating. So on that level, I can see where you're coming from, where you're like, he's being that way to us as well now. So there's that level too. So I do think it is interesting on that. I just think that what I don't want to say ruined it for me, but like made me like it less, was just it felt like a little bit of a mix of tones. Yeah, because it felt like a comedy, and then it like took a real hard turn with like abortion stuff and like being a new father and carrying a new mother. It really hit us really hard. Yeah. We were like, wow, I'm depressed now.
Especially in these times when abortion's a big button issue at the moment as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's also something interesting to say about like it being a British comedy too, and sometimes British humor is less it just functions differently than American humor in a way. So when it's branded as a comedy, this is a lot drier of a comedy than you would expect just a comedy to be. Because we also have a satire coming up that's like very overtly a comedy, very slapstick. But this is the opposite. This is more dry, witty, like I say, almost Woody Allen-esque comedy, almost self-deprecation in a way. But it's kind of one of those things where you have to kind of just first get on board with the comedy of it all, but then again, it teeters into some very dark stuff, so it's hard. Malcolm, where did you fall in terms of like the comedy drama? Did you see it more comedically? Did you see it more dramatically? Because obviously you live across the pond too, so like, what is your view on just the comedy of it?
I think it's one of those ones like I'm very used to like the British comedy aspect because British comedy is very similar to New Zealand comedy in a way too. Like it is a lot more of that more subtle, more dry kind of humor. And so I actually thought it was a perfect mix between the comedy and drama personally.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think that just comes to my sensibilities when it comes to that kind of humor as well. So there's a lot of movies I do like when it comes to British like comedies and that are all in that similar vein because if you've ever seen the original Death at a Funeral, it's pretty much that same vein when it comes to that comedy drama sort of thing. So
yeah,
I've seen the original and the remake actually.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because like we look back at like the 30s and 40s, and that humor is all very similarly one style, and now we look at our modern comedies kind of being kind of one of a same style. And this is a very interesting period because like the 60s and 70s is really when film really evolved into something different. So this was a very experimental time for that kind of stuff, like humor and comedy. So I do see why it is so divisive in that way because like Malcolm found it very funny, Chad didn't. I found it kind of more on Chad's side too. I found it more dramatic at times, but I can still at least see the attempts to be funny. It's just it wasn't personally funny to me. Like I didn't laugh, but I got it. I was like, okay, that is a joke, and I can acknowledge that, but I don't find it funny. So it's a very interesting kind of exploration of this kind of shifting of like we went from the slapstick of the 30s, 40s to like the present day, style of humor that we'd see with like the SNL guys. Now this is somewhere in between. I think it's very interesting.
And like it kind of reminds me a little bit of The Apartment. And when I first watched The Apartment, I was like, that's not a what? This isn't a comedy. Like, because I normally expect more of the haha, like joke kind of a deal. And then because people were talking about it being one of the greatest comedies. And then watching it the second time, and then every time after that, it just gets funnier and funnier every single time. But The Apartment's also one that heavily steers right into the drama with like the suicide stuff and things like that. So it's very similar on that, where I think you can balance both. And even though Alfie didn't for me the first time, I think maybe on a rewatch, if I do like a young Michael Caine binge, then maybe I'll dig it a lot more. It was just him seeing the aborted fetus. I'm glad they didn't show that, by the way, because that would have tanked it for me if they did. But then seeing that like someone had bought the baby a toy, and then I was just like, this is for me. I can't with this right now. I just
no, it's a lot. Definitely as a new father. Yeah, and I think it's funny because like Michael Caine, we keep talking about like young Michael Caine, but I think he just has such a kind of mature feel to him even when he is younger, to where it's like harder for me to see him as like I hear about Jude Law being him in the remake, and it makes a lot more sense to me because Michael Caine, I think of the more warm Alfred, it's like hard for me to separate that, whereas Jude Law, I'm like I can see him being the sleazy kind of sleeping around with all the women type deal, whereas Michael Caine, it's like the sweet man. But hey, that's kind of a cool acting exercise, I guess.
I got it from the performance, and then I was sitting there. I was like, I was sitting there trying to figure it out. I was like, is young Michael Caine attractive or just goofy looking? And then I was like, I couldn't. I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think he's an attractive, goofy looking guy, and then that's also steers into how he ends up being Austin Powers' dad at one point. Where I'm like, he looked exactly like Austin Powers. Austin Powers is also a goofy looking guy that gets women. So it's all connected.
Malcolm, have you seen a lot of like Michael Caine's younger stuff, or is this like one of your only?
I did watch. I have seen the original Italian Job.
I want to see that.
but I haven't seen much out of his other stuff though.
Nice. So there you go. That's Alfie. So if you want to check out a young Michael Caine with some great breaking of the fourth wall, there it is. The Academy didn't necessarily go all in on Alfie. It didn't win any of its Oscars, but it was nominated for 5 of them. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Michael Caine, Supporting Actress for Vivian Merchant, Adapted Screenplay, and of course, Best Song for Alfie. But it didn't win Best Song. It actually lost to Born Free from Born Free, which I listened to it. I don't think it compares, but that's just me. I was not there that season. Speaking of seasons, though, I mean, summer, fall, winter, spring. What's your favorite, guys? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about a guy who was for all of them. We'll talk about a man for all seasons. Chad, tell us about the Best Picture winner, A Man for All Seasons.
Well, I used to say probably summer, maybe, but it's been so hot. Never freaking mind.
Yeah, I'm like a spring fall kind of guy. Like not too cold, not too hot. Right in the middle.
I was just about to say it's either spring because of baseball starting, or then fall because then you're getting into Halloween. But then winter, I love Christmas. So I don't know. It's
Malcolm, how do seasons work for you? Do you get like kind of the changing of 4 seasons, or is it more like hot, cold, or is it always hot, always cold?
Well, I mean, it's always been a running joke over here that it's supposed to be winter. We never fully get winter. We get like 4 seasons in one day sometimes.
Gotcha.
That changes rapidly.
So you are quite literally a man for all seasons. I love that. Chad, tell us about A Man for All Seasons.
A Man for All Seasons, directed by Fred Zinnemann, written by Robert Bolt, cinematography by Ted Moore, music by Georges Delarue, starring Paul Scofield, Wendy Hiller, Leo McKern, Orson Welles, Robert Shaw, Susanna York, Nigel Davenport, John Hurt, Corin Redgrave, Colin Blakely, Cyril Luckham, and Vanessa Redgrave. Synopsis: Sir Thomas More becomes at odds with the king, and other stuff. A Man for All Seasons by Robert Bolt, which was a 1960 play.
Yeah, it's a quick turnaround. 6 years, play into screenplay, into film. Malcolm, I know we open with the guest, and I like to bounce it back to Chad or but I do want to let you open this because this is kind of the one. This is the one that you wanted to do. One of your favorite films of all time. Sorry to jump the gun there, but Malcolm, I would love you to open this one. Why A Man for All Seasons? Tell us about your love for A Man for All Seasons.
Well, I mean, yeah, like my love for this actually started when I was actually in the play Man for All Seasons.
That's awesome. Who did you play, Malcolm?
William Roper, hence the name.
Okay, I see. I get it now. I was like, interesting character to pick there. I was like, I wonder what the significance is. That actually makes so much more sense right now. Okay, cool. So tell us.
But yeah, because I watched the movie for the first time when I was doing that, just because I kind of wanted to be sort of see what the movie did with it, and it's just one of those ones like because I'm a big those that know me know that I'm a big fan of period pieces in general anyway. So like,
absolutely,
this was always going to be something that was going to be out my alley, and but when I watched the movie for the first time, like it was one of those ones that I was more astounded, like the amount of big names in this. Like you've got Orson Welles, John Hurt, who are 2 big names, and you've got like
Robert Shaw, from Jaws, and pretty big name, like a B list, but pretty at the time A-listers, and then Paul Scofield, of course.
Yeah, and funny enough, it's a relatively good year for the Redgrave family because the person who played William Roper in the movie is Corin Redgrave, who's the brother to Vanessa.
Wow. So both his sisters were nominated for Best Actress that year. That's pretty cool. And his sister also plays Anne Boleyn in this, Vanessa Redgrave. That's pretty cool. That's a great fan. Like your film wins Best Picture and your 2 sisters are nominated for Best Actress. That's pretty good.
But I mean, even more funnier though is later on they did a 80s TV movie about Charlton Heston, and Vanessa Redgrave I think played one of the main 2 leads. So it's like,
there you go. It's all in the family.
Yeah, but it's one of those ones like but I did actually rewatch it for this, but it's just really astounding, like the amount of set decoration that went into this, and it's just one of those ones that I think it's real good, and it's that they did change up the play a little bit because in the play they have this character that's just called the Common Man, who's kind of acts as kind of a narrator throughout the story,
Gotcha.
and pops up time to time as various characters like the jailer and all that. They separated that into the actual and have like actual characters rather than having this narrator type figure. But it's just one that I just really love. It's one that I really wish they would remake and put onto 4K or something like to get a physical media version of it some stage.
Yeah, because you talked about how like visually gorgeous it is, and I think that's like first and foremost. I think whether you're engaged with what's going on in the film or not, like it's just gorgeous. It's just so well done, and just costumes and just the way the everything feels so of the time, but like at the time still feels like popping and fresh. Like they're really making use of like the Technicolor, because like this was during like that big Technicolor boom, like of the big like movie musical era with West Side Story, and like just really deep reds and yellows and greens. So yeah, just visually one of the more stunning films of that decade for sure. Chad, what are your thoughts on A Man for All Seasons?
This one I'm a little bit like mid on. I feel like I think it's good. I liked it. But like, I also just like didn't know really what to make of it. Like, I think all the like you guys are saying, all the technicals are great. The acting is great. I think the story is pretty good. But it, maybe it is kind of like with Westerns. Maybe it is something where period pieces really work for Malcolm. For me, I think it just depends on which one. And this one, I just couldn't like super get into. I wasn't like really, really intrigued with the story or, anything like that. But, it kind of did. I mean, I liked I guess, like Game of Thrones-esque, like intrigue and people trying to come in and like convince this guy to do something. But then he's going to stand his ground the whole time and basically, say, I'm not going to do this against the church and things like that. And I don't know. I just was sitting there like someone like that, like back then, that would have been extremely important. And for me now, in like a modern like sensibility, I'm just kind of like, it's not really like that big of a deal, kind of a thing where it's like, you're gonna like, put your like family in jeopardy and then get killed because of this. And I don't know. I guess it just was like, where just trying to figure out like where the like drama really was. I mean, there was stakes, but it felt like just a lot of stakes this guy was putting on himself. And it feel like anybody was really asking him to like be this like martyr for a cause or something like that. I will say the acting I thought was some of the best in the slate. Particularly, I really liked. Well, I will say I liked John Hurt, and it's always insane when I see Robert Shaw and he's not trying to catch that shark. Kind of.
He's not Quentin, yeah.
And instead, he's just like this British guy. But in this, like the way he yells and stuff, I just thought was kind of great. So
yeah, he's the king too. He's not just a British guy. He's like the king.
Exactly. Yeah, he is the king. Yeah, that's right. But he is a British king. I don't know. But
no, I know what you mean. But like, yeah, like I think the reason he's so big and flamboyant is because he does have like this this king like stature. I mean, he does have he is the hot shit in a way.
For sure.
Which I think, yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say it is interesting because the film is like a lot about the king, and like what's gonna happen with the king and his marriage, but like they're barely in it. And I mean, I'm not saying they should be. I'm just saying that like it's interesting that they're not, and it's mostly about this one guy. And I just think that was kind of a cool device.
Yeah, it almost feels like the Silence of the Lambs device of like Hannibal Lecter is the lead of the film in the way that he has a presence over the film, but he's really not in a lot of it. It kind of feels similar to that, a little bit to a lesser extent, but it's all in that gaze of this overarching thing. Like his presence kind of looms over it, which is very interesting. I think there's something that you said that was very interesting about like it only being really about this guy and his own stakes. What are the greater stakes in it? But I do think the whole point of it is that everyone else does conform to what the king wants and kind of blindly follows their leader without questioning the morals. And I think it's something to be said about the fact that he is just a guy and it is his own personal stakes, but he's so committed to standing his own ground that he doesn't conform with the rest of the people. And I do think that where it does have the political relevance today is that it does kind of, not to get into very political specifics, but like the idea of blindly following and not being afraid to stand your ground and not necessarily committing to what essentially can become like a cult-like behavior in a way of just like, well, he's your king, so you're gonna obey what he wants. He's the king. That's all.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it is a democracy. We should all have a say. We should all have a voice. And I think that's what's very interesting about this is it's like the one guy. It's almost like David versus Goliath thing, but he is a Goliath, which is just even more interesting. Is how everyone turns on him despite him having this power position, and the fact that he is so powerful in his own right makes what he's doing even more shocking to everyone else. And I think there's something to be said about that because it is just one guy. That almost makes it even more polarizing because it's one versus all versus like, if you were to round up in like an army of people against, it was like a civil war. It's not, it was like very much one versus all, which I think is a very interesting device, but I get what you mean. It's like at the end of the day, he gets beheaded and like everything goes on as normal. But what I like about what the film does is that it then goes to say, then this person died, this person failed, this person died, this person failed, basically saying that like everyone kind of ended up not really getting much out of it anyway, and maybe we should have just listened to him. And I think there's something to be said about that. Just like what dignity and pride versus trying to do what is expected versus what is right. I think there's just some very interesting conversations to be had, and I do love what you brought up about like Game of Thrones, because it does have that very similar feel of like man walks out of a room, everyone talks about the guy who just left the room, and then when you leave the room they start talking about you and how they're going to influence you, how they're going to manipulate you, how they're going to kind of like pull you around like you're a pawn chess piece, and how they're going to try to like dictate what you do, in a very manipulative way. And I think that's refreshing, the fact that it's a political thriller, but it is set in this like period piece medieval kind of gaze, which I think is really cool. And also Orson Welles, like I just thought it was so surprising to see him pop up and be like, you're in 5 minutes of it, but like your impact, kind of similarly to Robert Shaw too. It's like these actors are only in like 5 or 10 minutes, some of them, but like they really do make an impact. And it was really cool to see a later Orson Welles, because I'm the opposite of like Michael Caine, where I've only seen really young Orson Welles performances. So it's like I haven't seen a lot of his older work. So it's like, oh, like I forgot he worked for so long. Like it's almost weird to think about it like that, like Orson Welles is not just Citizen Kane, he has other stuff. But I just thought it was really interesting. Yeah, Chad, you.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, it is funny because you accurately stated that like the movie ends with like kind of not many people getting what they want, except for Mr. Richard Rich, who I was like, Richie Rich. The whole time I was like, is that how they got Richie Rich? But then you have I liked how he went from like asking for this political position at the court, and then Schofield is like, no, and then he's like, well, fuck you then, kind of a deal. And then he like goes and gets what he wants just by being kind of like this little weasel, throughout the rest of the movie. And I like that. So that's one of the favorable parts of the movie that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Malcolm, this is obviously one of your favorite films. Are there any like scenes you want to highlight as like some of your favorites, or moments that stick out to you as some of your favorites?
I mean, it's one of those ones like the whole ending like scene in general I think was really well done.
It's the courtroom kind of scene, or the one where he gets beheaded?
I mean
leading, both,
yeah, I mean the courtroom scene sort of leading up to
gotcha. Like because that courtroom scene is just so good. It's like up there with like Few Good Men level of like oh, like it just gets you riled up in a way,
Yeah, especially when like Sir Thomas More is like going, but then you said to try to interject is like and so just think like the way that they set up all that timing and all that, just I think it was done really well. Like and just one of those I was like, there's it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, like if you're a fan of period pieces, like this is totally gonna be your jam because it does relish in, because it is kind of slowly paced. Like I did think, for only 2 hours, it does feel its length, but I do think it's purposeful and really relishing in the conversation of it all. It doesn't try to be anything more extreme. It doesn't have a lot of big battles or anything. It's not that kind of film. I think some people might see it like the exterior and think there's going to be a lot of that, but it really isn't. It's much more about the conversations, which I think if you kind of know that going in, it might make it better. But I don't know. I really enjoy it. But I do also see where you're coming from, Chad. Like it is not necessarily one I think that has held up more in the mainstream, because I do think it is a little alienating in that sense, and because other things have kind of tried to replicate it in a way that like Game of Thrones has, but the Game of Thrones has the additional like fantasy element and the actual fighting, that kind of elevates it beyond just political intrigue. But I do also think there's something to be said about it being such a small stakes thing that like it's kind of refreshing almost to see it be a little small stakes for me, because like we're used to seeing it be like this war and everyone's gonna fall and one will rise type deal. But now it's just kind of like a guy sitting in a room with all his peers trying to defend himself just because he doesn't even really have, I mean, it's not even like that wild of an opinion either. He's just like kind of just stating his mind and his thought. It's like freedom of speech, but also just freedom of thought and opinion. It's like we're not allowed to have an opinion on things, which is very interesting.
I'm actually really glad that they didn't have like the big battles. It was kind of just a very quiet movie until Robert Shaw shows up. And then it's not. and I also really liked a lot of the like legalese and stuff like that, where they're just actually I didn't say that, and stuff like that. So a lot of those scenes were very enjoyable to see the going back and forth and stuff. So I could easily see this getting better on rewatch as well.
Yeah. Anything else on A Man for All Seasons, or is that about cover it for now? I mean, I'm sure we'll maybe bring up some performances later, or maybe one or two performances. But anything else?
Not
cool.
Nothing.
All right. Sweet. So Man for All Seasons wins 6 of the 8 Oscars it is nominated for. It wins picture. It wins director for Fred Zinnemann. It wins actor for Paul Scofield. It wins best adapted screenplay, best cinematography color, best costume design color, because that was back when they separated it between black and white and color, reasonably so. And then it is only losing supporting actor for Robert Shaw and supporting actress for Wendy Hiller. But again, a lot of nominations on the day. They were coming for those Oscars. The Man for All Seasons is coming. Man for All Seasons is coming. But you know who else is coming? The Russians. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Chad, tell us about The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. It's such a tongue twister. I hate it, but I love it. But I hate it. Chad, tell us about this satire.
Every time I've typed it, I just type The Russians are coming times 2. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Directed by Norman Jewison. Written by William Rose. Cinematography by Joseph F. Barak. Music by Johnny Mandel. Starring Carl Reiner, Alan Arkin, Eva Marie Saint, Brian Keith, Jonathan Winters, Tessie O'Shea, Ben Blue, Andrea Drum, Paul Ford, Theodore Bickle, and John Philip Law. Synopsis: New England townsfolk fear a communist invasion when a Soviet submarine gets stuck. Based on The Off-Islanders by Nathaniel Benchley.
I was convinced for a second when you said synopsis, I thought you were just going to repeat the title, because that's what it is. The Russians are coming, and what happens when the Russians come? Chad, we'll start with you. What do you think about this film?
Okay, so I actually watched. Okay, so I actually watched this one not immediately after Alfie, but it was the second one that I watched in the slate. And after watching Alfie, when I was like, I don't know how I feel about that one. I'm not sure if I really enjoyed that one all that much. And then I watched this one, and I didn't realize, I think I had seen comedy, but I didn't necessarily realize it was gonna be a comedy.
Gotcha.
And I first started watching it, and then I was watching it, and then it just slowly started to get really funny. And then I was like, wait a second, like I did not expect this, and I expected it to be kind of like a straight, like kind of a war movie. And then as soon as like the Russians go into the house, and the dad's just like, telling them whatever they want to know. And then the little boy's like, Dad, don't tell them, you're going to be a traitor. Like, don't tell them where the gun is. Don't, do all this stuff and stuff like, tell them nothing. They're Russians, kind of a deal. I just thought, I was like, all right, this is getting like really wacky, and honestly, I loved this movie quite a bit.
Cool.
I really enjoyed the comedy in it, and just all the really wacky situations, the entire town freaking out, just hearing that Russians might be there, and then not even seeing anything really, and they're seeing the main Russians going through, seeing the one loner Russian that got like kind of stranded at the house, and seeing his relationship develop with that daughter, and then seeing, you know, like the one like a post office lady get like strapped to the wall, and the old man come in and going like, well, she's not here, I'm gonna eat my soup, and then finding out that she's there, and then like the whole town just freaking out and preparing to go to war to like fight these Russians, and like kind of, you know, questioning and putting everybody like to the third degree, and like, you know, what do you know? You know, have you seen the Russians? And then seeing it all come to a head with the actual like Russian military coming there or something, and then like the whole thing with like the little kids, and then them all coming together to save the little kids. I thought was like really funny when like the main Russian guy was like, we're gonna start shooting you in 10, 9, 8, and then he's like, you need to save those kids, you know, kind of a deal. And it's just like felt like really good and really funny. And I like the whole message of you know, I wrote down the quote where the young daughter went, "It doesn't make sense to hate people. It's a waste of time." And it's kind of like how it had that like sweet message of, you know, fear and paranoia and, you know, hatred, and how it's kind of dumb, and, you know, we can all like kind of rally over like one common thing that we all like want to save the kid.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, you know, in this society, in America right now, we can figure something like that out too.
Right. I wonder how this would play to a modern audience. Like if they were to like rescreen this, like how the opinions would be on it. Because I don't know where this is in relation to the Cold War. I don't really know exactly when the Cold War spawned from. Like the years.
This is the Vietnam War, or right around 1966.
Right, but what about the Cold War? Is that around the same time? I guess. Yeah, probably around the same time though. But really, like, I mean, a lot of the best satires pull from what is new and what is current, and that's why we always rattle off the history of that year before we get into these movies every time, because it's important to kind of paint it in context. And I think, you know, honestly, we're kind of seeing repeated things, tensions with Russia, and like, what does that mean, you know, for not just politics, but for film, you know, like how does that actually influence? I think we have an answer here. Yeah, 47 to 91. So a big span of time. But that whole time, you know, we're getting a lot of like this kind of Russian, you know, tension. And I like how there are films that don't necessarily have to like address it with the harshest like violence per se, but do it in a more comedic light. Because I also think it helps people understand kind of the silliness of fighting in general and war in general. So I like how satire just like kind of functions in that way. And I like how, especially in the slate, I actually think this movie plays better in a slate with 4 other films that are, you know, 3 of them are very heavy. Obviously, Virginia Woolf heavy, Man for All Seasons heavy, Sand Pebble really heavy, and then like Alfie not as heavy, but like still comedy, but like very dark, kind of more dry comedy. This is very just like full blown satire, silly hijinks comedy, which like at first I think if I had watched it isolated, I would have been like, all right, that was sweet, that was fun, that was whatever. But I think in the context of all these other films, it really adds like a nice palate cleanser, which is why I'm glad it's like smack dab in the middle, because I watched these in order. So it kind of was like this kind of refreshing jolt of like, okay, this is at least something a little bit like of a let up. But I still don't know necessarily how much I love it just on its own. Like I really need to kind of sit with it more. I didn't laugh as much as I think Chad did with it, also because again, comedy is so subjective. We just talked about it with Alfie. It's like what kind of comedy do you lean toward? Do you like the more drier, wittier stuff? Do you like the more slapstick? Do you like somewhere in the middle? And I feel like this is very much the polar opposite of the type of comedy Alfie has. So it's very interesting to see these 2 films, and also see a film like this back to back with a film that we'll talk about next, where it's still dealing with like the idea of America's relation to another group of people and the tensions of war of the time. Like I think it's just very interesting how like this functions compared to that, because they couldn't be more different too. So I think it's really cool to just see how different it is. And in looking at Norman Jewison's work, I mean, he's one of my favorite filmmakers, but like, you know, In the Heat of the Night, which we covered obviously, which won Best Picture, very different from this. Fiddler on the Roof, very different than this. And Moonstruck, very different from this. Like all his 4 picture movies are very different, could not be more different. And that actually kind of makes me appreciate him more, because like this one didn't necessarily have a huge impact on me, but I still can look at his overall filmography and say like, this is a guy who didn't want to be a one-trick pony, and I really appreciate that he's willing to like
Yeah.
switch it up. Like Moonstruck has comedy, but it's like very much still about the romance and the beauty of that romance. And like Fiddler on the Roof, it's, you know, this beautiful immigrant story. It's a musical. And then you have like In the Heat of the Night, which is like this crime kind of thriller. It's like really interesting how he's able to like diversify his slate of films that he made. And I think, you know, this might not be my favorite of his, but I do think there's something to be said about a guy who can also deliver just like a very clear cut, solid political commentary satire, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, he's kind of like Stanley Kubrick in that way. When
Yeah,
he has Dr. Strangelove, it's kind of the same exact thing, but he does like so many other different genres. Real quick before Malcolm can talk, is I wanted to say the tagline is, "It's a plot to make the world die laughing."
You're right. Yeah, again, like it doesn't. I think it takes its subject matter seriously while not taking its tone seriously, which I think is important in getting this message across. Honestly, I wish it was almost a little bit more, you know, a little bit more direct, and it went a little bit further with the actual like political commentary, like actually like making a bit more of like a real powerful statement. But at the same time, it's like that's not necessarily the film like that they want to make. You know, they want to make it a little bit more light, which could just be helpful in the midst of other art that is doing what I wanted it to do in a way. But William Roper, weigh in, sir. What are your thoughts on The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming?
Yeah, no, this is one that I didn't know what to expect going in, because I thought it was going to be a full-on war movie. Like, and like Chad, I didn't realize that it was going to, how funny it was going to be. But yeah, it's one of those ones that I don't necessarily know if they re-released it today, it's going to do any help. But maybe if they ever remade it with a modern audience in mind, then maybe those films will come out better in a remake than a re-release. But it's one of those ones, like, it's definitely one of those movies that more people need to see, because just everything that's going on around the world at the moment, especially involving the Russians. It's one of those ones, like, all this stuff is just stupid. But going back to the movie, it's just one of those ones, like just the fact that it all started just because this Russian went, that they instead of sending in a distress call, they just decided, oh, we'll just go on the mainland and go to this house and ask for a motorboat just to get help. It's like without realizing like how much of, so I think it was like 9 people they sent down there. So just the fact that that's how it all started, I think it was just was really where this comedy started. Just, and then like as soon as more people found out, like just the whole distress of everyone escalating and all that, and I just thought it was a lot of fun and really good.
Yeah, I think there's also something interesting to be said about like if they were to remake it today, because I think the problem with like satire is for something like this, it's trying to show like we can coexist, we can get along, they're good people, but it's also like you don't want to necessarily excuse everything they're doing that's wrong either. So it's like you got to kind of find that tricky balance of like how much do we condemn them versus how much are we trying to like humanize them. And I think that's the big challenge and why it is a little toothless in that way, because they can't really sink their teeth into either making them full-fledged, you know, they're good guys, or full-fledged, they're awful people. You know, it's kind of trying to find that like medium where it's like we can disagree with them while also still coexisting and not necessarily needing to fight them or feel like we're in a constant state of fear or judging them just by them, you know, who they are. Because it's another thing too of like your government does not define all the people under it. You know, it's not like it's in some cases there's like a bad apple spoils the batch type deal, but for some cases it's not. Sometimes it's just they don't have a say over who their government is, what their government's doing, in a way where it's like, you know, who do we look at in different respects? Like, are all of them the same? Or, you know, and that's the case we're having with just like race in general, race relations with you know, people still can't get behind some of those ideas too of like, you know, kind of grouping everyone as one cohesive, like, you are all this thing or you are all this thing. And I think that's what this film does very interestingly, is kind of like finding those variations. But it is a very interesting conversation to have, of course. Yeah, Chad, you were gonna say something.
Oh yeah. I was gonna kind of also piggyback off of that, the remake idea, because I do think it's a very interesting idea, because I do think this would be a one that would be really fun to be remade, because if you can have it like be like as slapsticky and like just like really kind of silly as this one is, but honestly I think Dylan is right too, where it's like, I mean, all the political movies we see coming out, like The Hunt and Civil War and things like that, are just so divisive these days, where people just automatically jump on it and go, that's going to attack my side. And then you're like, the movie's saying there shouldn't be side. Kind of deal. And no one's going to understand that. No one's going to jump on it, and no one's going to see it, kind of a deal. But that being said, I do think it is an important movie, and I did like how that one main family started to, like, they were afraid of the Russians at first, and they started to like them. At one point, the father does actually, stand his ground, and he shoots at Alan Arkin's character, and you think that he's dead at first, and then it turns out he's not. And because they've like developed these characters, I think good enough, I was like, well, one, I was afraid for him, or both of them really. One was dead, and one was probably going to go to jail or whatever. And then I was like, or maybe not actually, I guess, if you kill an enemy of the state. But I was like, no, don't, oh no. And then he wasn't dead, and I was pretty happy about that. So the characters I think are really good in this as well. And speaking of Alan Arkin, a friend of the channel, Dan Skip Allen, sent his ranking, and then sent who he would have picked, and I was like, oh, Alan Arkin's in the slate, oh cool. And then I watched all the movies, and then I was like, wait, wasn't Alan Arkin supposed to show up at some point in these movies? And then I looked back and I went, that was Alan Arkin? I had that one of those moments where I was like, holy shit.
Well, yeah, and it's for me, it's like I immediately recognize the face. I was like, I know who that is. And I think it's also because I look at the cast list before I watch it.
Okay.
So like I kind of knew he would be in the movie, but I watch him like, that looks like Alan Arkin, but then he starts talking, and obviously because of his accent and his voice, it doesn't sound like Alan Arkin, because we're used to kind of like the old New York kind of way he talks. He talks like this a little bit. But like I kind of like how it's like a different kind of voice, so he doesn't feel like it's Alan Arkin giving a performance. It feels like its own character, which I really like. Malcolm, had you seen a young Alan Arkin performance before, or was this your first?
I watched MASH, but that's probably as far as young Alan Arkin goes to me.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I, like Chad, had never seen a young Alan Arkin performance really, so like that was really cool. Kind of like the Michael Caine thing, but Michael Caine still, like, it's Michael Caine. You know it's a young Michael Caine, whereas here it's like Chad said, it's very disguised in a way, and he also has that big mustache, which if you look at Letterboxd, people are horning it up for that mustache. They think it's the sexiest thing in the world. Which, like, if you're into mustaches, maybe you should watch this film, because apparently it's a very sexy one. I am not into mustaches, so I don't know. I think they're really cool, really rad, but I don't have like an attraction to them. But if you have an attraction to mustaches, this may be the movie to watch for you. Any other thoughts, guys, on The Russians Are Coming? The Russians Are Coming.
Well, just thoughts on young Alan Arkin.
Oh, yes.
It turns out before this one, the most recent movie I had seen with him in it was Edward Scissorhands in 1990.
Okay.
So there you go.
So he's still a little older, though. Very interesting, though. The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming 0 for 4 on Oscar night. It's a satire. It's a little harder probably to get on board with it, and because Man for All Seasons swept a lot of it. But it is nominated for picture. Alan Arkin is up for Best Actor, adapted screenplay, and of course film editing. But before they came, they had to hit the beach and hit those sand pebbles running. Were there beaches in The Russians Are Coming, or was it more of like a bay vibe? But they came from the water. That's all that matters. But before we get to land, if we're coming from water, we have to hit the sand. As I said, the pebbles of the sand. Tell us, Chad, about the Sand Pebbles.
The Sand Pebbles, directed by Robert Wise, written by Robert Anderson, cinematography by Joseph McDonald ASC, music by Jerry Goldsmith, starring Steve McQueen, Richard Attenborough, Richard Crenna, Candice Bergen, Mariette Adrienne, Mako, Larry Gates, Charles Robinson, Simon Oakland, and Ford Rainey. Synopsis: a veteran machinist is dragged into a nationalistic feud when he joins the Sand Pebbles crew, based on The Sand Pebbles by Richard McKenna.
Nice. Yeah, I love how like they're credited with their like guild names, ASC and ACE. Kind of like when you're a lawyer and you write Esquire, it's like kind of like a title. Because ASC stands for the American Society of Cinematographers, so it's like Joseph McDonald ASC. Like it's kind of like a title thing, which is really cool.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of gorgeous cinematography, but Sand Pebbles. Chad started the last one, Malcolm started the two before that, so I guess I'll start it with the Sand Pebbles because I really like this one. I think this was one that I was really dreading because it kind of gave me the vibe of like, is this going to be Sayonara again? Because a few months ago, Chad and I, as well as Matt, talked about Sayonara, which was, you know, war film about a white guy loving an Asian woman and their cultures kind of coming together and learning that like they're real people too. It's a very like what we would now call like white savory type message. But the fact that it was Robert Wise, who is like quite literally one of my favorite directors of all time, West Side Story, Sound of Music, and obviously one of the editors, the editor behind Citizen Kane. He actually got to start editing Citizen Kane, and they were like, you should be a director. And he did it. He actually couldn't get the funding for this, couldn't get the studio approved. And in the meantime, while he was waiting, made Sound of Music as like his, like, I'll just do this in the meantime. And that wins Best Picture. So, I mean, hey, like this guy has the juice. But I was really surprised by this one. I think because when you look at it, it kind of like what you guys thought about The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming. It's like you look at it and it just feels like it's going to be just another war film. You know, it's got to be a lot of shooting and battles, and like there're probably going to be some really racist depictions. And this guy's probably going to be a hero who does a lot of shitty stuff, but because he's Steve McQueen, we're all going to love him in the end. But I really think they did a good job in making this kind of like A Man for All Seasons. I think they're all kind of connected in a way because it's like it's A Man for All Seasons in the way where it's not about the battles, it's not about the fighting, it's about this character study about this guy who is slowly realizing the wrongdoings around him and trying to make an effort to stand up to it, but also feeling restricted in his world in doing so. And then it feels like Russians are coming in a way because it's trying to show how stupid it is that there's all this fighting in the first place, because this is like that was in the Cold War. This is in the midst of like the tension with Vietnam. So it's like the whole idea, this doesn't directly relate to Vietnam, it's more China, but it's like the idea of like, you know, why are we fighting? What are we fighting for? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? And like, are they all the same? Are we all the same? Or can there be nuance? Like, are they all what we society are told they are, or are they real people that we should listen to, that we should learn from? Like, I like the scenes where, you know, he wants to shave and he's like, I'll shave myself. And they're like, you know, I think it's the phrase like, that's his rice bowl or something. I love that idea where it's like, no, like that's, you know, his get, like, let him do it. You know, you don't have to necessarily feel like you're better than them in every single thing. Like sometimes you have to just like hand the keys to the car over and ride shotgun every once in a while, you know, to put it in a more broad sense. But yeah, I really like this. I thought it was a great character study. It flew by for me. 3 hours. I think also because like a chunk of the 3 hours is that beautiful overture in the top. Jerry Goldsmith, one of the great like 60s scores. I think that score is just like absolutely like tear running down my cheek when I first heard the opening of that score. And then of course they have the intermission. I don't know what version you guys watched, but there was like a significant intermission for me where it was like a 20-minute intermission. Like they actually had the intermission. But yeah, I really felt like this flew by. I think also because it's centered around Steve McQueen's character, but it also has like the really beautiful story with Richard Attenborough and the woman he falls in love with. And, you know, when they get married, and that's very terrifying, but like beautiful scene where he passes away, and, you know, the stuff at the end in like that dark kind of like alleyway situation, like not alleyway, but like it kind of has this like shadowy, more gothic vibe. Like I really, really like this film. And I think because it does kind of break the convention of what a war film is, and it almost felt like Bridge on the River Kwai in the sense that it's like kind of in a single location, doesn't feel like this long sprawling thing, feels very kind of isolated, which I really, really liked. But a lot of people out there not as big fans. Like we had some people writing into the show saying this slate, you know, not their favorite, and a lot of people have been ranking this pretty low. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about it. So the Sand Pebbles, there's my 2 cents. We'll go back to you, Chad. What do you think of the Sand Pebbles?
Sure. Yeah, no, I definitely got Sayonara vibes just because it just feels kind of very similar. I think it was the Richard Attenborough falling in love.
Yeah, that's very Sayonara for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of got that, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." But I feel like, I mean, I like the one in Sayonara as well. But I think I like this a little bit more, where it's like in that specific part, everyone was like, you know, because she was like a virgin, and they were like, you know, this brothel, she's a virgin, so it's $200, and you get like the night with her and stuff. And then he's like, if I had $200, I would just give it to you. Like, you know, he just like fell in love. I just thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, and I like the bidding war they have where it's like everyone else just wants to sleep with her, but he's like, no, I want this. I want to free her. Like, I'm not trying to buy her as property. I'm trying to give her that money so other people don't use her as property. Like, I don't even want her to myself. Like, I love her and I want her for myself in that sense, but like, it's not a property thing for him. It's like I'm fighting for love versus you guys fighting for without those heads instead of this head. Like, it's very interesting that scene where they're fighting and they're stripping her down on the table. Like, it's very hard to watch, but it's one of those very just like powerful declarations of love. But sorry, continue.
Hey, no worries. Yeah, definitely a lot of great thoughts there too. Honestly, like, I don't know, like for a 3-hour movie, or I think this was longer than 3 hours. I was
with
like,
the intermission, I think it's like 3:26 or something, 3:16, something like that.
so I didn't have the intermission, which is interesting because I was like, there's a natural break, like right at like what 90 minutes, where I was like, wow, that's like pretty much halfway.
Yeah, because I think without the intermission, it's 3:05. I think is
okay.
So that makes sense.
It went to black, and then I was like, oh, is this gonna have an intermission? It didn't, and then like it was a natural place for one. So I guess that sometimes there is one.
There you go.
So I don't know. This one didn't fly by for me. You know, I didn't. I'm not saying the pacing is off. I'm just not sure how much actual like story is there. Like, I guess it's because they did take their time. It's not like, you know, Oppenheimer, where it's really fast paced and so much is going on. It's just like weaving timelines and stuff like that together. But this one is more of a slower story. You know, I like the fact that it's like the main character, Steve McQueen, because I think the only other Steve McQueen movie I've seen is The Great Escape, and he's not like the main guy there. There you go.
There he is.
I mean, I guess he is the main guy, but there's other main people like Donald Pleasance and stuff.
Yeah. Also Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, also there. So I mean, I guess I like the story of him because I'm also like, I was curious the whole time where I was like, is this racist or is this nuanced with that? Because it's hard to tell when you're like mid-60s and you're like, I don't know what this is going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like it might have been a little bit of both, but I think like the characters are kind of supposed to be very racial and insensitive to people and just, you know, calling them coolies and stuff like that. And just, you know, being very like the whole, that's his rice bowl kind of a thing, like kind of turned, like made me go like, okay, you're using that as a derogatory thing, aren't you?
Because of the Asian connotation. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, you're right. Because I've heard the saying said in just other ways, not specifically related to Asian. But I do see your point, though. Like, when they say it, it's more like it's his rice bowl, like emphasizing the rice of it all. Exactly. I didn't think of that. That's a good point. Because they do have to make a lot of the other supporting characters racist to further influence what Richard Attenborough and Steve McQueen's characters go through on the other end, too, which is
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I did actually enjoy Steve McQueen's like character when he takes on that like protege, Chinese protege who really, really sad what has to happen there with that. But, you know, I liked how they made that like relationship kind of deeper. So when he had to like kill him, you really felt it. You know, maybe it was kind of like a George and Lenny type of thing there between them. Yeah, and then it kind of like just goes on to like this whole like third act thing that where like the main character just kind of, spoiler, just kind of dies, and I was just like, I don't know, I just don't know if it like ended that well for me either. And then I was just like,
yeah, I mean, I took it as like a rebellion, almost like a Man for All Seasons, like a rebellion against the system, against the man, being like, no, I'm not going to stand for this type deal. I'm gonna, you know, at this point, I have nothing to lose. I'm already as bare as I can be. I'm out here. I'm up front. Yeah, but that is a very interesting, and again, this kind of feels a little bit more 70s-esque, where it like just ends with him getting shot and lying dead on the ground. That's
true.
You know, like that is a very unconventional thing, I think, at the time of like, oh shit, they just killed him and he's like lying there. It's kind of like the end of Alfie, where it's like Alfie's just like, well, fuck, I guess I'll go home, and then they play that song, and it's like a lot of these movies are like ending in these very grim ways. I mean, same Man for All Seasons too. It's like, oh, heads off, the end. It's like the movies are really daring to go darker and not end with like these happy resolutions, which is different from something like Sayonara, where it's trying to be like, yay, we can all be friends, the end. It's like, no, like there's some deep shit.
And it's just kind of interesting where like it is like deep into like the evolution of China, because it's shown like China evolving over time and kind of like how they take like Americans in their midst and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of interesting how they showed it, and then how they had the focus still on the naval presence. But then I'm also like, for a 3-hour movie, we like didn't really even like get any like scenes of like political like discussions amongst the Chinese or anything like that. And I'm like, this is a 3-hour movie. Like, maybe you could have had that, but or maybe that would have been like how All Quiet on the Western Front was, where it was like this whole war thing, and then you pivot to people talking in rooms, and you're like, maybe don't pivot to the people talking in rooms.
Yeah, because it's like, it's interesting because it is just fully a character study. It's more about that than like the actual political intrigue, which is very interesting. But also like, yeah, if you're looking for that kind of conversation in a way, it like doesn't feel as whole because of it. It doesn't feel like a great representation of that kind of period of history as much as it does like the single-minded attitude, not single-minded, but this like individual attitude of what's going on, more so than like the actual facts of it, which is something, if you don't know a lot about the conflict, could be definitely a con for the film for sure.
Yeah. And I definitely want to let Malcolm talk, because we've been, but I did want to also say, you already mentioned this, but I wanted to second it, that I remember the Jerry Goldsmith score before I knew it was Jerry Goldsmith, being like really, really good. And I was like, holy crap. Okay. That's definitely, one of the most powerful things in the movie. And then I found out it was Jerry Goldsmith. I was like, well, that's why. There you go.
Just to show what it looked like on my end, I did find the intermission point. It is exactly halfway through the film, but it kind of cuts to black and then immediately goes intermission. So
nice.
I got the intermission.
I wish that had happened.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And again, like, I guess you can all make your own intermissions. I think it'd be cool to like do like a podcast where we find a long movie that doesn't have an intermission and see where the intermission would be. Like, where would you put it in Endgame? Where would you put it in Lord of the Rings? William Roper, Mr. Malcolm Lay. What do you think of the Sand Pebbles?
Yeah, honestly, there's probably not much more I can add to that.
Sorry. I hate going first because I feel like I talk so much that I get everything out there, but I'll let you go next first, Malcolm. But what are your thoughts on this?
No, it's all good. It's one of those ones, like, I thought the acting in that was good in the movie, but largely I was largely bored by the movie. Like, it's one of those ones I went into this thing like, oh yeah, it's going to be a war movie. It's going to be this big bombastic, like, big war battle things. Like, it was just one of those ones like I wasn't expecting what I got. I thought like there was definitely some good scenes in that, like the scene where they're all trying to bid for this lady to go to different, like, to go to their table, and like. And the fact that just like, no, I want you to stay here. It's like, no, I've got to visit all these other tables. But it's like, but there's definitely some good sense in there. But it's just one of those ones, like, just didn't feel like there was any really sort of solid plot that was actually going anywhere. And it just felt like a mishmash of scenes, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean,
should have had more comedy in it. That's what I
think. The sand is pebbling. The sand is pebbling. I like how every time we say the sand pebbles, it sounds like the sand is pebbling rather than like the sand pebbles. It is the pebbles of sand. Because we've been putting the emphasis on the pebbles. I don't know why I keep saying that, but yeah.
I guess we could just chalk this up as a very villain movie.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like not even like. And here's the thing. I think the slate in general, we've been kind of dancing around whether or not it's a great slate, mid slate, bad slate. Malcolm's very high on it also because he does like some of his favorite movies in there. But like, as someone who hadn't seen any of these, like I do think in general the slate itself is not my favorite on first watch. Like, I'm still just like a little underwhelmed by all of it. There where like this one is one of my favorites of the slate, but I still think in comparison to other movies, like if you're looking at this and Bridge of the River Kwai, that one literally, for lack of a better term, blows this one out of the water. That's a really bad choice of words, but I really do think so. But I do think this is at least better than like Sayonara because there's more than just the romance going on. And I do think the actual depictions of the Asian characters, like there are racist characters, but the film itself is not being racist towards its Asian characters. It feels like they are really given a spotlight of like humanity, which I really appreciated. But I do think if this were released today, something like this would kind of be falling under that kind of white savory trope, I feel, if not necessarily handled with all the best care. And I do think that you could trim this down for sure. So like, I'm not necessarily saying it's one of the greatest films of all time, but like, I think for this slate that I'm overall a little bit more underwhelmed with, I think this film for me is one of the ones that is like a highlight for me. But in the same way that like the comedy for Russians didn't land for me as much as it did you two. So like I think it's just one of those things where this slate, I'm really interested to see when we rank these, because I really think we're all gonna have I don't know if we'll all have a similar number 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Like some of us might share the same number 1. I'm not sure. But it really is one of those things where this slate, I think we're gonna have some weird rankings. Not weird, but like very different rankings. So that's really fun. So the Sand Pebbles, 0 for 8, doesn't win a single one. You know, this is a lot of losses here for the Sand Pebbles. So the Academy agreed with Chad and Malcolm more than they agreed with me. But it is gonna not get Best Picture, not get Best Actor for Steve McQueen. But it does get nominated for those two. It also gets nominated for Supporting Actor for Mako. The young Asian man, so that's like a really cool nomination. Again, like I love when they kind of find these up and comer, like one role gets a nomination, breakout star. Original music score for Jerry Goldsmith, which it loses. I actually have to see who it loses to, because it's not any of these. I'll look at that in a sec. Best sound, best art direction color, best cinematography color, and best film editing. And I'm looking now to see who it lost best score to, because if so, I want to listen to that score and see. Why don't Chad tell us about? I'm afraid to see who won best
Sand
score.
Pebbles lost score to John Barry for Born Free.
Born Free, which also beat Alfie for song. So Born Free must be like the musical revelation of the decade. I'm quite afraid of Born Free, but who am I? Who else is afraid? Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Old me.
I really butchered that, but I was trying to find a way to get from Sand Pebbles to Virginia Woolf. It's tough in a movie, a war film. Well, hey, I have a good segue. Want to talk about a real war film? Let's talk about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because that's what I'm going to open with. Is it a war film or is it not? But Chad, what was your segue idea? It sounds like you have one brewing.
Yeah, I was about to say, when you were like, it was 0 for 8, the Sand Pebbles, I was like, geez, why were they so afraid of the Sand Pebbles?
Yeah.
Kind of a deal. But you had a really good one too.
Yeah, it's tough because like all the this Virginia Woolf movie doesn't have Virginia Woolf in it, and then the movie about Virginia Woolf is called The Hours, so I can't even I don't know. Anyway,
I had always thought it did have Virginia Woolf in it, and I was like, oh, it doesn't.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Nope. No Nicole Kidmans and fake noses in this one. But Chad, tell us about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Directed by Mike Nichols, written by Ernest Lehman. Cinematography by Haskell Wexler. Music by Alex North. Starring Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, George Segal, Sandy Dennis, Agnes Flanagan, and Frank Flanagan. Synopsis: a marital quarrel breaks out when a professor and his wife invite another couple over for a nightcap, based on Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee.
Yeah, the reason I'm very tired recording this podcast is because I literally stayed up late to watch this. Didn't realize how long it was. It's longer than I expected it to be, because I've seen the play and I was like, oh, it's a very contained play, obviously, because the movie's very contained. So I was like, it'll be quick, hour and a half or whatever. And then I turned it on and I was like, oh, it's a little longer than 2 hours. So I'm like, okay. And then I watched it late into the night. But I feel like this is the type of movie to watch late into the night, because it is kind of about that. What happens when you should be sleeping but you don't. It's like the How I Met Your Mother, like nothing good happens after 3 a.m. Go to fucking bed. But I do want to open with Malcolm, because Malcolm has talked last the past 2 times, and we've kind of took all the words out of his mouth. So I will open with you, Malcolm. First off, are you afraid of Virginia Woolf? And second off, what do you think of this film?
I mean, first off, every time I was singing the song "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf," I've always wanted to. I always ended up finishing by going, "Who's afraid of little old me?" It's like it's that kind of similar kind of tone of that song. But it's just one of those ones that Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? This is one that I thought I'd like more than I actually did, because I remember we were doing like classic comedies on Rank, and like someone brought up Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I hadn't seen it for that, but they're going like, oh, this is the must see, like it's really good and all that.
It's definitely the most popular of this slate nowadays. Yeah.
I mean, I would argue maybe Alfie might have
Right.
But
At the time for sure, Alfie, but like I think with
yeah,
time more people reference this one. But again, like this slate is all in all pretty underseen nowadays. But
yeah. But but yeah, like this is one of those ones like I I didn't know much about this movie going in, and to find that it was all pretty much like a one location type movie, like, and I think the play itself, because I was reading up about this, I think the play itself was literally just one location, like all the action just took place in this place. They added in those outside of the house scenes for the movie. It's but it's a interesting movie. It's one of those ones I got confused about what was actually happening, but it's just
Yeah.
I was just more intrigued in this whole drama between Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton. I can't remember the other two actors' names.
mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those ones that I think this whole thing is like there's definitely some moments like, oh, is she going to cheat on this person with this person, or this is like this going to be one of those like love quadrangle type situations. And but it wasn't. But it was just a lot of fun, especially sort of when you with the younger couple. Like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to have a baby, like but it's just never been the right time. Versus this older couple who was lying about this their son and all that. So it was a really good interplay between both those sets of couples. But I like this enough. But yeah,
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring up like the baby thing because like I think that's the big kind of like big reveal of the film is that like the whole time you think it's like an ordinary people thing where they lost a son and that's why they hate each other, but it's really the fact that they never had one in the first place and they've kind of conjured this false thing and that seemingly was the only thing keeping them together to where now like he's essentially killing off this thing that wasn't even existed and like what that means for that couple in that moment. Have either, I know Chad you have, Malcolm, do you watch The Office?
I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay, this is the dinner party episode, but like not
Yeah.
funny. this is, well, I mean, there's like bits of humor. Obviously, it's more
There's
like
humor.
it's humor, but it's not in the same way. But I do think this is like, I mean, obviously, it's inspired by this movie for sure. Like, I can't not be like, but the idea that like you have this couple over and like they are just totally innocent. One of them we find out is more ulterior motives. He wants to sleep his way to the top at the school, and he's going for because the guy who owns the school is her mother, Elizabeth Taylor's father. Is like the head of the school, and that's seemingly why like her husband is kind of with her too, and like that's kind of why men are attracted to her is more for her father than her, and like that whole idea. But like then when you find out his ulterior motives, but really they're just this innocent, especially her, she's this innocent young woman, is going to this lady's house, doesn't know her husband's really there to work his way up the ladder, and then just like they walk in the door and immediately like the first thing they hear when they open is like, you suck, like this like very toxic environment. It's quite literally like the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan when they land on the beach and they step out the tank or whatever, or they land on the beach and like all of a sudden you hear the gunshots and the noise and it's like, holy shit, you're on the beach at Normandy. Like that is this film. And that's why when we were saying earlier, I was like, this is more of a war film than Sand Pebbles is. I'll say Sand Pebbles is more about the character in the midst of war. Here we're seeing war. There is combat. It might not be hand to hand, but there is just nasty combat. This is one of the most interesting war films I've ever seen. And I don't know if you all categorize it as a war film, but I think it's very cool.
Especially the scene where Richard Burton's bringing out this gun and it turns out to be an umbrella.
Oh my god, yeah. And in that moment, I'm like, wait, I don't remember this because I saw the play a long time ago, but I was like, she no one dies. But I'm like, I don't remember a gun. But then it's like it comes out of the umbrella, and but that's what is so masterful about this. First off, they all suck. Not the young woman. I think Sandy Dennis is the most innocent, but like the other three, they're probably some of the worst people you'll probably ever meet in real life if they were real. But I do think like there's something oddly sad about Elizabeth Taylor's character where you almost kind of feel bad for her because when it starts, you're kind of like, this lady's just annoying her husband, like shut up and go to bed. But as it goes on, you're like, no, he's the one stirring the pot. And he's the one, like, he literally brings that gun out only for amusement of it not going off. Like he's doing some fucked up shit. And like the whole, like, killing off the kid that didn't exist. Like he's doing some really fucked up shit too. Like, it really is just like, battle of, like, they're one-upping each other with like this horrible behavior, and it's really fascinating to see because in, again, like, turn of the century, this is not the type of film you're used to seeing at the time. Like, this is very much experimental for sure, because of what it brings. But Chad, I'll let you talk about it because I have a lot more to say, but I'm sure you'll cover some. So what were your thoughts on Virginia Woolf?
Well, first thing I wanted to touch on that Malcolm kind of brought up is this, we talk a lot about like this year and films like Challengers being extremely sexy. I was like, there's a lot of like risque stuff in this movie when it's like little comments like after he does the gun stunt, then oh shit, what is there? Elizabeth Taylor's characters like, talking about the young guy who was like, you don't need to use a fake gun or something like that. I was like, oh god.
Yeah, it's all rooted in like, I want to kill you, but I also want to fuck you at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really, it's fucked up. It's sadistic shit, but it's like, I don't know. And the fact that they end up hand in hand at the end is the most perplexing thing, because it's like, did this make them closer? Like, I can't believe it. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, I will say I love this movie. I think this movie might be a masterpiece. I watched this twice.
Okay, you said you were rewatching one. I thought it was, sometimes you won't get something, or you won't like vibe with something, and you'll be like, I'll watch it again and see if I like it more. So it's more of like, I like this so much I watched it again thing.
It was that, but also there's so much fast dialogue and so much dialogue that is very like, you're like play oriented, where it's like it almost kind of like an importance of being earnest kind of deal, where it's like what they're talking about is different, but then like, when he's like, talking about like, Martha, no, that's my wife. No, that's my wife kind of a deal. And I'm just like, I get tripped up on words sometimes. And so I was like trying to figure out like, but also just kind of I really was excited to listen to this dialogue again, because I think it's so well written and just like how everybody interacts. Everybody has their own little quirks, like the lady who just throws up all the time. And, all the arguments are just so fascinating to hear the back and forths. It's kind of like watching Marriage Story in a way, where it's just like fascinating to see them argue back and forth about all their issues. But you have the added aspect of the game. Like Richard Burton just loves to like play games with his wife. And I love that idea about, it's kind of like a bit almost to them, but it's like intense and like real, and it concerns like real stuff.
Yeah.
Even though it also concerns fake stuff. And the people who come in, like you said, come in right into a war zone where, normally if you're fighting with your spouse and then people come over, you're supposed to stop the fighting, put on the smile,
be accommodating. Yeah, exactly.
Accommodate your guests, and then continue the fight later, kind of a deal. But they're not doing that at all. And they, in fact, invite these people into their fight, into their game. And they don't even tell them that they're playing a game the whole time. He does the weird thing with the gun, freaks everybody out. And it's scary too, the way they show the gun coming out, and you think someone might die if you haven't seen the play. Because I thought he was about to shoot her, and then I was like, "Is that what happens in this movie?" Like right in the middle.
Right. Yeah. That's why I was like, I don't remember this. Yeah.
And stuff. But yeah, I loved the idea of the child being a game, and it's like she lost the game when she brought the child up, and so she, then he's forced his hand now to change the game and write the child out of the story. And and then I also really liked the like really sad but kind of sweet like connection that they have because of this whole game. Like they're a couple who can't have children, so they invent one. And, this story is kind of like their child. And it's just like really, really interesting how it's like a toxic kind of thing, but also it works for them, where they love doing this game, but they also hate it, and they hate each other, but they love each other. And it's just very weird and very interesting. And I can see myself actually like watching this a lot because I find it fascinating how it like transitions between stuff and and then they go dancing in a bar, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I love the shot where the woman just comes in, because you forget that they're like at a public place, so there's other people too, and then like the woman just kind of comes in and like, what is she? Let's like put the check down or something like that and like walk away or something. And brings them like all waters or something. Yeah, just such a funny, just little one scene wonder there. I just want to really quickly talk about what you said about the game, because the whole very title of it. I mean, you look at this title, you're like, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? You assume like, is this going to be a story about Virginia Woolf? Like we watched The Hours, that was all about Virginia Woolf. I think the whole thing is that this whole like meeting is predicated on a really fucked up joke. The fact that you're using the tune from the Disney animated short, The Three Little Pigs, who's afraid of the big bad wolf, big bad wolf, big bad wolf, and substituting it with this woman who was very clearly depressed and wrote about her depression of living as a woman who hated herself and hated the people around her and the men around her and wanting to like live in this like better off dead type deal. And it's like, when you look at the grand scheme of the movie, it's all about them living within this joke to hide the fact that they all are fucking miserable, and that she especially is like on the brink of suicidal depression, all that. And I think it's interesting how it's not really overtly said, but just knowing that like the whole reason they're meeting is because she told a joke about like, haha, who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Because like you're all writers, you're all writing teachers who like hate having to teach Virginia Woolf because it's challenging, and she's a woman who challenges people, but she's also a woman who's fucking depressed, and you guys can't handle it because you're men who don't understand what a woman is like in this state. And like I just think it's such a cool meta commentary as well, with like the fact that this is literally also Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, a married couple playing these roles, and they themselves got divorced and married so many different times that it's like this, how much of this is just real, and it's almost frightening in that way. I'm like, I don't want to know how much of this is like actually real. I mean, she didn't accept the award, she wouldn't like go into public because he didn't win the Oscar with her. Like there's something to be said about that, but like, is that a healthy thing? Is that a toxic thing? I don't know, but it all just intrigues me so much to where like I haven't even thought of it as like all a constant game. I've always thought of it as him playing the game and her trying to like not play along, but like he's very clearly leaning more into her. But like I do like what you said to her, maybe she is playing the game with him, and it's just like one of those things where she has a harder time actually separating the emotion from it, or she almost too harshly separates the emotion from it and acts out and lashes out. Yeah, just so much, there's so much to chew on here, but yeah, very interesting.
Well, because like towards the end there, when he's writing the character out and he's like, and he died from, and the story I found like kind of funny too, like, oh shoot, how does it go? It was something like I forget, there's like an object or something that
right, because he's like dodging something in the road and he hits a tree. Like, yeah, because that's how his parents died. It was
fine.
Yes,
and I was like, that's kind of like, just let's see like how it happened and stuff. And then when you realize that it was all fake, you're like, oh, that's actually kind of humorous. And then it cuts right to the drama again with the, oh wait, they actually couldn't have kids, so this is actually really deeply sad. And then you really feel that from Elizabeth Taylor. And then you also kind of feel that from him when he's got like the somber thing where she keeps asking, did you have to write him? Did you have to kill him? Kind of a deal. And like, her saying like, you can't do that, or you can't like, I forget like the wording that she used, but it's like, basically hinting that it's all been a story and all kind of a game, the way she words it. Because it's like he's the one killing him, but it's like, he is, but kind of a deal. And so I really got the emotion from like both of them. And then because she was kind of playing into that with like her words, like, we wrote this kind of story together, or he wrote this story and she's been living in that world with this nice idea of them having a kid, and then disagreeing on what the eye color of the kid is and stuff like that. One other thing I wanted to add real quick was just one line that I wrote down to show I just love like these little lines that they make just like to show how bitter they are, but it's also kind of darkly funny where it's like, by all means, drink away. You'll need it as the years go on. I was like, damn, okay.
Yeah, so weirdly philosophical and dark. Yeah.
And it's one of those where I kind of want to watch the play or like read the play, just like aside from the movie, but
it's almost more intrusive because you feel like you're actually in the room with them fighting, and it's like almost like more uncomfortable in my mind. I actually, for the first time I watched this, it was kind of similarly to Malcolm. I wasn't in it, but I was in an acting class, and two of my friends did a scene from this. And I believe it was either the scene right before they get there when they're fighting, like when it brews up till then, or it was the 4-person scene, but I don't remember who the other two were. And my friend Julie, I'm shouting her out now, Julie Ullman, if you're listening, one of the most amazing things I've seen live in an acting class. Like the way she embodied this role was just like, this is before I saw the movie too. So like just the drunkenness paired with like the seduction paired with the absolute hatred for her husband and love for her husband all at once. Like it was one of those things where like ever since then I've been so connected to this because I'm like, wow, like it's just such powerful work. And I think Elizabeth Taylor, a lot of people say it's like the greatest performance ever, like period. And I'm like, I was going into this being like, that's a high remark, but I watch it and I'm like, I get where they're coming from because it is also one of those like classic performances. I mean, Mike Nichols, his first film, and he gets this like kind of nails it on the first go, and then the fact that he makes an even better film with like The Graduate a year later, Graduate '67. He made this a year before his next film, which is one of the greatest films of all time. Like that 1-2 punch of this and Graduate is like one of the most impressive like first two outings, I think. But yeah, just really solid. Anything else, Chad?
Yeah. There was the one thing I was going to bring up was.
Oh, great! I thought you already did. Sorry,
no worries. When he George told the story to the younger guy, where he talked about the one kid who had killed his mom and then went to the bar, made everybody laugh or the restaurant, made everybody laugh by mispronouncing something or whatever it was. It was kind of a weird story. And then it's like, he went on to be locked up and then he didn't speak a word for 30 years. I was like, this is Michael Myers that he's talking about. This is Halloween, that whole thing about the kid. And so I was like, that's like really interesting that he basically.
And the kid is him, right? I believe like that's the whole thing is like that's what happened to him and his parents. Like I think, or was that just like a made up? Like I thought she was talking about her husband. Like he's the kid in the story who killed the parents, and they've used that as like his own story for his kid. I don't remember though.
Well, it was like a made up story, but I don't know if there was like a truth in it as far as like he was the kid, because I think he like put himself in the story as like a kid he knew or something like that, or whatever. But then later on, you find out that Martha's like, oh, that story about, did he tell you the story about that kid or whatever? Or because she mentions the funny word that he says or something like that. And so, and I think the guy laughs and then they're like, oh, did he tell you that story that he wrote or whatever? But yeah, I don't know if it had some realism to it or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Right. For some reason, I thought there was a line there that was like that revealed that it was his own story. But yeah, again, it moves so fast. It's like one of those things I want to revisit again. Also to see the direction and how the actual like physical blocking of it, because I was so roped into the actual like dialogue and performances that I didn't even think about like he's doing a lot with one location. I mean, it gets nominated for production design and all these things because it is so important in how it uses the space, which I think is interesting for sure.
Actually, the way you bring that up, like you talked about it being like very experimental, like because I was wondering, I was like, this is a play, so it's one of those where it's like, should it have been a movie?
Right, it's a little stagey in that way,
yeah, but like I'm like the way it's filmed, like I love like a lot of the handheld stuff and like just handheld zooming in on people and things like that. Just love the way it was shot, and I thought it just seemed like felt so like seamless. So I feel like this one actually does really, really move really well. And a lot happens in 2 hours, but I think this one's pretty freaking perfect. I love it.
Malcolm, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to bounce off Chad's point about the whole play. So I think all the plays, like I think, can lend themselves to be a great movie as well. Because like, take The Whale from a couple of years ago, was like that's a play, but the way they filmed that movie is pretty much like you're on that set as well. Like they did a good job like making that seem like a movie as well. But and it's one of those ones like, and with every play that they do, like they will change up some things, so what makes it more cinematic. Because I'm pretty sure with Wicked that's coming out later this year, they're going to be doing some changes to the musical that they did. But the other thing I was going to bring up is I don't think none of us talked about, but the score itself for this is actually really great. It was
So
really
good.
good as well. And I was just looking it up, and apparently the composer of this, he's the most nominated composer without a win. He's
Wow.
been nominated 15 times.
Well, Alex North.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
and
did.
sadly he won't be nominated again. It seems like he passed in 1991. That sucks.
Yeah, and he was the first composer to receive the honorary Academy Award. But he did like A Streetcar Named Desire, Death of a Salesman, Cleopatra, Spartacus.
Nice.
Wow.
Those are the well-known ones that I recognized on this list.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just but the score itself is just really good. And the other thing that actually really occurred to me is like, is this one of the only years in which all the Best Picture ones are all adapted from something?
Maybe because they're all adaptations. Yeah.
Yeah. And all these adaptations like that, the original thing that they're based on, all were released around really not too long before the movie. So they were jumping on these books, plays really quickly to get movies off.
Interesting. Yeah, like, I mean, you mentioned Streetcar Named Desire. That's another big one of the time. Like this and that are like the two big ones that people talk about as like the best like play to film adaptations, and they generally happen around the same time. So
yeah. Well, I just wanted to throw out there real quick because Dylan talked about like Mike Nichols and between The Graduate and this being like a 1-2 punch kind of a deal. Honestly, I think he might have been like the master of like movie endings, because we covered The Graduate when we talked about how brilliant that ending is and uncertain. But like this one, I just love like the quiet, like them together, kind of peaceful and being nice to each other. And like, yeah, it had to happen. Like this is kind of how life is. And like Malcolm bringing in, talking about that score, like, coming in and just like, oh man, I thought it was a brilliant ending too. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we'll talk about him much more on this show. I think I don't remember if Working Girl was nominated or The Remains of the Day, but like just want to give him his due real quick. 42 Academy Award nominations in his career, 42, and he wins 7. Like that's huge. He is an EGOT winner. He won an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. If you have not seen what's it called, Angels in America, it is the greatest miniseries ever made, I believe, and it is one of the greatest things ever made. So I highly recommend watching that. I think that's one of his best. But The Graduate, obviously, we've covered on the show. But like Catch-22, Silkwood, Working Girl, Postcards from the Edge, The Birdcage, another classic. Charlie Wilson's War. He's just one of the greats, and I'm so glad. And in the theater realm, I mean, The Odd Couple, Death of a Salesman, Betrayal. He put those all on their feet. Barefoot in the Park, like all these great Broadway revivals and plays. Just one of the great artists of all time. So I just really wanted to bring light to him because he's just one of my favorites, and I'm glad we're getting to talk about one of his best works, because we've already talked about The Graduate, but I think like those two works are so influential that I'm really
Working Girl was nominated for Best Picture, by the way.
All right, so we will talk about him again. But that is Virginia Woolf. Any last thoughts on this, guys?
Beautiful.
Cool. All right, we might talk about it very shortly in just a sec. But Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf wins 5 out of the 13 it is nominated for. It wins for Best Actress for Elizabeth Taylor, Best Supporting Actress for Sandy Dennis, Best Art Direction Black and White, Best Cinematography Black and White, and Best Costume Design Black and White. And it is nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Mike Nichols, Best Actor for Richard Burton, Best Supporting Actor for George Segal, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Music Score, Best Sound, and Best Film Editing. Which again, as Malcolm reassured us, that it lost to Born Free for Best Score. Just putting it out there. I mean, hey, I will watch Born Free. If enough people watch this video, I will watch Born Free to see if it really does have the best music of the year over this and Alfie. We will see, or Jerry Goldsmith. But it is now time to rank these movies. Something that Malcolm does on Take 3 all the time, rank them. But here we're going to be ranking just these 5-ums. But Malcolm, you are our guest, so we will kick it off with you. What is your number 5 of these films?
My number 5 is The Sand Pebbles.
All right, Chad, what is your number 5?
Number 5 is Alfie.
All right, my number 5 is Alfie. All right, so Malcolm, what is your number 4?
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
All right, Chad, what is your number 4?
Number 4 is The Sand Pebbles.
All right, and my number 4 is The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. Malcolm, what is your number 3?
The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming.
All right, Chad, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is A Man for All Seasons.
All right, my number 3 is A Man for All Seasons. So, Malcolm, what is your number 2?
Alfie.
Chad, what is your number 2?
The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming.
All right, and my number 2 is The Sand Pebbles, which means our number 1s. Malcolm, what is your number 1?
A Man for All Seasons.
Chad, your number 1 is?
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
And my number 1 is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So here's the math here. By the math, by 1 point separating A Man for All Seasons and Virginia Woolf, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf will be our winner based on the points. It scored number 1 for me and Chad, number 4 with Malcolm, but very close. Man for All Seasons. If it had been 1 spot higher on Chad or Eyes, it would have tied, and we would have gone to a wheel. But hey, we don't have to worry about that. Virginia Woolf did score the highest, but by 1 point. So it is all very, very close, close slate here. But we are now going to talk about the acting, because the acting in the slate, someone, friend of the channel, I will not name names. Let's just say we're going to skip over his opinion of this being bad acting in the slate. No, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I think the acting is actually pretty stellar in this slate. So I think the acting is the standout of this slate, even when the movies aren't great. I think the acting is still great here. But you teach their own. No, we love you, Dan. But there, I said it. Malcolm, I believe you are first this month for actor. So take it away, Malcolm. Who is your best actor of this slate?
Yeah, no, it's the reason why I picked this first, and I made the clarification in the chat. Like, this is where I think the Oscars was right, because I think Paul Schofield is great as Sir Thomas More in A Man for All Seasons. Like he's just one of those ones. Like, especially in that courtroom scene once again, where it's like trying to get his truth out there for what happened and all that. I think everything he did was perfect. So
yeah, it's a great, especially that courtroom scene. Yeah, like you said, just such a commanding performance. And yeah, I do think, even though I have a different pick, I think the Academy did not get it wrong, let's say. But I am next, and I'm going to go for who I think the Academy should have given it to, just because I think he's just got so much range in what he's doing. I think Paul Scofield is an amazing winner. I'm not taking it away from him, but I do think Richard Burton's performance in Virginia Woolf is like one of the best of this slate. I just think it's such a charismatic one at first, but then it becomes like a very dangerous one. It just has so many layers to it. There's a humor to it, but there's also like a morbidness to the humor of it. It just got so much different colors in there, and I think it's just one of those great performances that doesn't really get talked a lot about, because she kind of steals the thunder in terms of the win and just the notoriety and who she is and stuff. But I do think he deserves to be right there with her as one of the great performances of this decade. So I'm going Richard Burton. Chad, what say you?
Well, I was going to go Richard Burton, but I'm glad you took him, because he definitely deserves to be here. I 100% agree. I think Malcolm's pick is also really great. I also want to go a Man for All Seasons actor.
Okay.
So I was gonna go John Hurt, but instead, I don't know if I did this before, but I'm gonna go Robert Shaw.
Nice.
First time or again. I don't know if I got him for Jaws or if you got him.
I will look right now. I definitely took Al Pacino that year for Dog Day, so you might have taken him.
I definitely
but
did.
You might have. I think you might have taken Jack Nicholson for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But let me check. Let me check for you. I'll check right now. But please tell us.
And if I did, then I'm glad I'm picking Robert Shaw here. And I was sitting there thinking about this, and as we were talking about A Man for All Seasons, I was like, man, John Hurt's so good in this. And then I was like, but I love Robert Shaw. like without
I went Pacino, you went Nicholson. So this is Robert Shaw's first win here, which is awesome. Yeah.
He's getting his due. Because I think he was incredible for in Jaws as well. And pretty much everything I've seen him in. Even like the one of the older Bonds that I saw him in. Yeah, but yeah, I love, as soon as he like steps off the boat into the mud, like he kind of like jumps into the mud, and everyone's like, oh, like worried or whatever that he just stepped in mud, and he's like, hey, kind of a deal, and just like really like happy or whatever about it, and just like laughing, and then everyone starts laughing, and then when he goes to talk to Schofield's character, and he's just so loud and like, you know, angry a lot of the times, but also happy and just excited and stuff like that. I don't know. I just thought he was a really commanding presence in his own right, despite not having as much screen time as I thought he might, being the king.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, Malcolm, any thoughts on Robert Shaw, since it is your favorite movie of the slate? Any other thoughts on Robert Shaw?
I mean, not really. Robert Shaw is great as the king too. Like as I said earlier, I think all the acting in Man for Seasons is just great. So
yeah, it's a great performance. Very lively. Really, one of the standouts in a movie with a bunch of standouts. So it's a great pick. But Chad, you are going to be first for actress. I'm very curious to see what you do here. I want something, so I'm seeing if you give it to me or not. But go with your heart, go with your gut. Yeah, you're picking her. Go for it.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes, it's the right pick. You're right.
Yeah, no, as soon as I watched Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, I'm like, if I can, I'm picking both of these guys because this is like one of the most fascinating movies I've seen. Obviously, it's my number one. I just adored this movie so much. They were doing so much, but like she brings so much to this movie. Like when you hear about Elizabeth Taylor being like one of the like biggest actresses, most famous actresses from like this era of film. And we even like saw her in like what was it?
Father of the Bride.
Father of the Bride. That's right. Because I was trying to think of the title because I remembered her being like the daughter in that movie, and then to see her being like this, kind of aged woman in this movie, I thought was like really fascinating just to see how like aggressive and crazy she got, like drunk and loud and just like, but like strong, or she's like, just fighting with her husband the whole time and like not giving him an inch to, whatever. And like, I'm going upstairs to change and, stuff like that and just being really big. But then also, showing these like very vulnerable moments as well. Like when, he talks about like the killing the child and she just like breaks down crying and just felt so real. I was like, wow, like she's like really, really crushing this. So honestly, there's no other route I could go with this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know. We may someday rank all the winners of Best Actress, or at least of our Best Actresses.
That sounds like fun.
But like I do think there's a conversation to be had for maybe not the greatest performance to win an Oscar, because I still think there are some that I would put above it. But for that category, maybe. I think people mostly say her and Meryl Streep for Sophie's Choice. Like those are the two most people say are the best of all time. So like the fact that we watched one, like I just think it's something we shouldn't take for granted. I'm glad you picked it at number one. They actually wanted Bette Davis for the movie because they thought it'd be funny if Bette Davis was talking about what Bette Davis movie at the beginning and like some meta thing. But instead they said, let's actually get a toxic couple in this role. That'll be our meta instead of having Bette Davis in it. But I'm going to go Sandy Dennis as the supporting actress in Virginia Woolf, just because I think, obviously Elizabeth Taylor is for me the obvious pick, but I think next to it, I mean, she did also win the Oscar. I think she adds a good balance because the other three are so toxic. I think she's the least. She has her own shit she's going through. She's not perfect by any means. She's got a lot of deep, heavy shit she's handling, but I think she's the most innocent. And I think you need that light to kind of add that levity to the situation. It's kind of like Pam during the dinner party in Jim. It's like you need that person to be kind of just the more straight-laced while everything else is hitting the fan. And then like I guess Dwight is more of like the George Segal kind of figure, where it's like he's also partaking in the mess, but not necessarily directly the mess. So that's my comparison there. That's the last I'll bring up the dinner party. But Sandy Dennis is great. I love her. She's so sweet. And some of the best teeth of any actor, just such iconic teeth. We just lost Shelley Duvall recently, rest in peace. Another great teeth actress, but just like iconic teeth. You know what I mean. Exactly. I said it and you know what I mean.
She was so adorable. I loved her in that movie. That's a great choice.
Thank you. Malcolm, who are you gonna pick?
Funny enough, I think we all probably had the same thought of Elizabeth Taylor. But I did kind of have a backup plan too, because this is the one I'm kind of surprised she fell into supporting actress, because I would argue that this person is the lead actress of Man for All Seasons, and that's Wendy Hill, who played Alice Moore. Was like, well, yeah, like she wasn't in a lot of that movie, but she was still a very big force throughout the movie at the same time. similar to Robert Shaw, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I thought her acting was great, and while I did like Sandy Dennis and Who's Afraid of Virginia
Virginia.
Woolf, I would argue that Wendy Hiller probably should have won, but I'm not that I'm hating on Sandy Dennis, because I do think she was great in the movie as well. But I think Wendy Hiller was just great at showing emotion and all that, especially in the scene where she's talking to Thomas in his cells, and he's bringing up you make great custard tarts. So there's I don't care about custard tarts or this. I just want to
right.
I want you. It's it's just all that is it's just great. It just really brought out that sort of play aspect as well that I thought was great in the movie. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, love it. It's a great pick. I think of all the actresses from that film, it's the best. So I do not fault you there, Chad.
I just thought of your actress, Dylan, in the bar when she's
Sandy
just
Dennis,
when she's just violence, applauding for violence.
Everyone needs that fun, supportive drunk friend. So to recap the year of 1966, I'm going to start with acting here. My best actor, Richard Burton for Virginia Woolf, or for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. My best actress, Sandy Dennis for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Chad's best actor, Robert Shaw for A Man for All Seasons. Best actress, Elizabeth Taylor for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Malcolm's best actor, Paul Schofield, I don't know, sorry, A Man for All Seasons, and Wendy Hiller for A Man for All Seasons. And our best picture of 1966, as decided by our rankings, is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There you go. Man for All Seasons wins 3. Virginia Woolf wins 4. Very top-heavy slate here, where those are the 2 films that won. Nothing else here in Picture This, but that happens sometimes. Very exciting. Before I head out and all of us head out, I'm not going to keep them on here without me. But before we all head out, we do have to tease next month, and we are still in the year of classics, and we're still going to stay in the 60s. We're actually only going to go 2 years further. Next month, very special month, my sister's birthday, Miss Kelsey Kilpatrick. August 12th is her birthday. So we figured for August, she has not made an appearance yet on Picture This. We figured get her on the show to talk about something Kelsey and I both met doing, which is theater, and 3 very prominent, I believe, theatrical adaptations came out in 1968, which we'll be talking about. I actually don't know. It might be more than 3, but 3 very obvious ones for me, at least. And then we'll see about the other 2. I haven't seen the other 2, so I'm very curious. But that slate for 1968 is going to be Funny Girl, The Lion in Winter, Oliver, Rachel, and Romeo and Juliet, the Zeffirelli version. So very exciting. Got some play adaptations, some musical adaptations, a musical winning that year. I believe the first time I watched Romeo and Juliet was with Kelsey in an English class in high school. I believe I might have done Oliver with Kelsey. I don't know if she was in that production. I don't remember. But again, Kelsey and I met doing theater. So that is going to be a really great episode to talk about classics, but also talk about theatrical adaptations and just great films in general. We got some Hepburn in there. We got a tie for Best Actress. A lot of interesting stuff's happening next month. But Malcolm, thank you so much. This has been so awesome having you back. It's always a pleasure to have you on because you are the king of period pieces. You really championed Shakespeare in Love and Elizabeth last time we were on for 1998. You're really championing A Man for All Seasons and Alfie here, but it is really awesome to hear you talk about one of your favorite films and just be part of this discussion. Any last thoughts on this slate, maybe the future slate, and also just where can they find you? What are you up to? Anything.
Well, just quickly, 1968 is another year where it's all adaptations because you've got 4 play adaptations. Lion Winter, which is a book, I believe.
Gotcha.
No, Lion Winter is the play. Rachel is the book. But you can find me on Tape for Productions. I host Bankham every Sunday night. This week we're doing Top 12 Channing Tatum movies.
Nice.
You can also find me on my own channel, Middle Earth Media. I host my show Spear from the Past, where I talk about a wrestling pay-per-view from the past. Next week we're doing WCW Slamboree 93. And then you can find me popping up on hosting trivia on Full Metal, and I'm on the Movie Hero Network. At the time you see this, we would have just done the same title tournament, and then we're probably in the middle of the later series for 2002.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And yes, I did fact check. Lion in Winter also play. So there you go. 4 plays, or 2 plays, 2 musicals, and a book adaptation, Rachel. So very exciting. But thank you as always, Malcolm. It's really a pleasure. Chad, any last thoughts on this slate, next slate, and just this episode in general?
Well, I think, first, I do want to say I think Malcolm was very great guest. Loved having him on. I'd love to have him on again in the future because this was a really fun episode. I didn't know what to think about this slate, but I had a lot of great conversations with you guys, and also 1968. Hey, I'm wearing a shirt from 1968, not literally, but the movie is. So I might have to wash this and wear it again for the next episode.
I'm doing the next episode as Hal for Retribution for 2001 not getting nominated in 1968. So I will be an AI version of Dylan for that episode. Just saying. Sorry, Kelsey. Just it'll be a red screen with a yellow dot in the middle. Yeah. Sorry, Kelsey, you're not gonna see my face.
And you'll sing Daisy, Daisy.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those movies, but I'm really excited. I'm really excited for some musical fun and play fun. And
you've never seen all of it?
No, I haven't seen it. I'm very excited to. Yeah, and excited to have Kelsey on because we always have fun discussions with her. And it was interesting. I don't think you have our usual letterbox info and stuff down there.
Well, that's because when we have 3 guests, I like to minimize it. So I always minimize
there we go.
Because if I do this, sometimes it would cut off the top or bottom.
Makes sense.
So whenever we have a third person, I do make it smaller. But for plugs, I will put this up here, Chad, because they can.
There you go. Yeah. Check that stuff out. I rebranded to Cinema Chad, so check out my channel there. I haven't done too much, but I've recorded a lot. I just need to upload some stuff because I got some more You Ranking With Me episodes where we rank stuff on there. And check out all those previous episodes. I'm trying to start doing more reviews and stuff. It's just been harder with having a child now. But also check out its own channel now, Welcome to Primetime, where we talk horror movies and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all stuff like that. But I think that's about it for my plugs. But yeah, this was a great episode. Thank you guys.
I'm looking now and I'm pissed just because I'm looking at all the movies that didn't get nominated. I'm like 2001,
Dude.
The Producers.
I mean,
Rosemary's Baby. I don't know.
I would also argue this created a subgenre of film.
It's just crazy. We'll talk about it next month because we have to go. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time on the Year of Classics for Picture This. Bye.